Okay, here we are on the Gradebook spreadsheet, part 3, where we're ready to start entering in our formulas. We've already learned how to do formulas. You could do an easy, simple formula, for example, for total points, and just add these four numbers together using a long, simple formula, B2 plus C2 plus D2 plus E2. And if you pressed enter, that would actually work. But there isn't actually an easier way. So if there's an easier way, go ahead and do it as long as it works. What this easier way is called functions. If you use this tool up here, it's called the AutoSum function. There is actually listed the top 5 or 6 most commonly used functions. And if you click on more functions, you will be able to see literally dozens and dozens of other functions available for financial use or much more advanced math functions. But we don't need those. We're actually going to use just these top 5 most commonly used ones. So to use a function, which is really just a formula that it kind of writes for you, you first click where you want the answer to go, and then go ahead and click the one you want. We're going to use this AutoSum function, which adds together numbers. And what it will do is go ahead and type in the equal sign for you. It'll type in a function word, and then it puts in a range. It usually tries to guess what it is it thinks you want to add together, and in this case it's guessed correctly. These 4 numbers, so it's come up with the range B2 through E2, and it's telling the computer to add together everything in between B2 and E2. Now if I press enter, that's going to go ahead and calculate, and I can do the same thing for each of these students. So I'm going to go ahead and go to total points for Joe, click on AutoSum. Once again, it's selected the correct number, so I go ahead and press enter. Now here's where we can either keep going with our sum function, or you can do a new shortcut. If you take a look at this formula, it's doing B5 through E5. It's adding together those cells. If I do the next formula for Kevin, it's going to be exactly the same formula, except for one thing will change. The B5 will change into B6, and the E5 will turn into E6. So those numbers will simply go up by 1 because the computer knows that you're 1 more row lower, and we're in row 6, so it's going to up them by 1. So if you ever have a formula where everything within the formula is going to increase by 1, you can use what's called the fill handle. The fill handle is right here in the bottom right hand corner of this selected cell, and if I click when my crosshairs are a black X and drag down, what the computer is doing is rewriting that formula but increasing each formula by 1 row. So B6s will turn into E6s, or B6s will turn into B7s, B8s, B9s, and so forth. So these formulas will actually work. Now, if you click inside the formulas like I just did here, notice you are in formula mode, so wherever you click, it's going to enter in that formula or that cell address. So you want to make sure you are careful where you click, and when you're done looking at a formula, press enter to kind of lock it in. All right, so we've gotten the total points for everybody here. Now we're ready to move on to their percentages. And when you create or calculate a percent, the easiest way is to take your total points. So I'm going to start a formula with an equal sign, click on total points for Joe, and then I'm going to divide it, which is the slash key, by total points possible, which is F2. So I've got F5, which is Joe's points, divided by F2, which is the total points possible. If I press enter, it's going to give me a decimal. Now that decimal is actually a percentage, it's just not formatted correctly. So if you have not formatted row or column G into a percentage, you can do it by simply clicking here or selecting from the list percentage, and it will turn that number into a percentage. And you can increase or decrease the number of decimal places as you like. Now, we are ready for that shortcut, but if we were to use the shortcut of using the fill handle, what would happen is each number in this formula would increase by 1, just like it did for our totals. But if you look closely, the F5 will turn into an F6, which is correct. We want Kevin's total points. But the F2 will turn into F3. It'll increase by 1, which if you look up here is a blank space. So what we need to do is called an absolute cell address, where we will lock in one of these numbers. The F2 we want to always have remain as F2. So to do that, get it within the formula, add a $sign in front of the F and a $sign in front of the 2, and when you press enter, it'll calculate exactly the same. But now, when I do the fill down handle, it is rewriting that formula, but instead of increasing everything within that formula by 1, it is increasing only the F6. It's leaving the F2 consistently F2 because I've locked that in with the dollar signs, making it an absolute cell address. All right. Now, we're ready to move on to some of these more complicated functions. We got highest score, lowest score, and average score. These are more complicated only because you haven't seen them before. They are actually very easy to do. If I click on the sum command button up here, I've got sum, average, count numbers, max, and min. We're looking for the highest score, so that is the max function. And again, it's going to try to estimate which numbers it's looking for. And you see it did a pretty good job, although I have an extra blank cell here. So what I'm going to do is click and drag on the ones I want it to look at. And you'll see it rewrites the formula for me. So it's going to find the highest number between Joe, Kevin, Sarah, Julie, Bobby, and Jen's numbers. Press enter, and it finds that Joe's is the highest one. Now the lowest score, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to use the min function. And you can see it completely highlighted the wrong ones. So I'm going to go up here and drag and force the formula to look at the correct numbers, B5 through B10 again. And then the average, once again, click on average. I'm going to have to click and drag to force it to look at the correct averages or numbers and press enter. All right. Now, if I look at this formula and analyze it, B5 through B10, if I use the fill handle, will it work if I move it one to the right? The B's this time will change into C's because I'm dragging it to the right. The column letters are going to increase instead of the row numbers. So B's turning into C's does work, so I can go ahead and use my fill handle and drag that all the way to the right for all of these, including my overall grade. All right. And that is going to help me find the highest, the lowest, and the average for all of these numbers. Now, when I dragged over average, you'll notice that we've got a lot of decimal places for some of these numbers. I'm going to actually go ahead and turn these into percentages. And I'm going to round the average scores down to just 2 decimal places. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You can use these shortcuts to simply shorten yourself to 1 or 2 decimal places. Or you can use the number dialog box launcher and tell it to be number and specify the decimal places right here. I believe we want to have 2 decimal places for the average score, and you can see it rounds it up or rounds it down depending on where that decimal falls. All right, now you are done with part 3.